Come closer. Can anyone still see the PowerPoint? Alright, I'm ready when you are. Alright. All you need is love. By a show of hands, does anyone know where this line came from? The Beatles, right? The Beatles are probably the most well-known band ever, period, end of story. That's all, folks. So, where'd they come from? Their rise to fame was so rapid, it seemed like it was overnight. And how'd they get so famous? And why did they leave such a legacy after only being together 7 years? These are the questions that I wanted to know the answers to. My favorite band and British pop music. That takes us back to the beginning of British music in America, taking us back to the Beatles because they were first. Being a British group, this may not be a necessary point to make, but they're from England, and Liverpool specifically. Behind me is a map of Liverpool to show its location in respect to London, which I think we all know where that is. The band was started by frontman John Lennon in 1957. However, at this point, they were not the Beatles. They were known as a group called the Quarrymen. The Beatles that we are all familiar with today didn't come together until 1962 with the final addition of Ringo Starr as drummer. At this point, the lineup was as follows: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. In 1961, during a performance at the Cavern Club where the Beatles were regular performers, Brian Epstein spotted them and soon became their manager. In 1962, prior to Ringo Starr's joining of the group, they performed for Decca Records in an attempt. However, Decca Records was not impressed with them, and I found this shocking. So they turned them down. I'm kind of hoping that they fired someone over that because that was one grand opportunity they let walk out the front door. Following the rejection at Decca Records, Brian Epstein firstly said, "You guys have to be out of your mind. These guys are going to explode. One day, they will be bigger than Elvis Presley." Who would have guessed there'd be truth in his words? Someone saw talent in these four boys, and that person was George Martin of EMI Records, who signed the band in June of 1962. In 1963, the Beatles experienced their first hit, and there is some debate over what it was. Some sources say it was Please Please Me, while others say it was From Me to You. Regardless, this was only the beginning of the many hits that would come from the Beatles. As far as hits goes, the Beatles had 17 number ones in the UK, but they actually had more in the United States, topping up at 21 number one singles. Aside from number ones, they had many more successful songs released. I've listed 10 behind me that include some of my all-time favorites. So where do we fit into this? Well, let's set the scene. The year is 1964, and we're all standing outside JFK Airport. But why? Because the British are coming, and no, not the military, but the Beatles are touching down in America, and there are 3,000 screaming teenagers waiting. And it sounded Now, there's no debate over the Beatles' first single in the United States. It was I Want to Hold Your Hand, and it actually stayed number one for 7 weeks straight. As if that wasn't impressive enough, when they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, they broke record with 73 million viewers tuned in, my grandma being one of them. Because of America's hysterical response to the Beatles, they launched their first American tour in August of 1964, and Beatlemania was in full swing. All good things, though, usually come to an end and end up bad. And the Beatles are no exception to that. But however, most good things don't leave behind the legacy that the Beatles did. The legacy left behind by the Beatles is unmeasurable, but here are a few things that demonstrate their impact. First, there are hundreds of tribute bands around dedicated to the Beatles alone. I actually got to see this one, 1964 The Tribute in 2008, and it's an amazing show. It's so similar you can't even grasp it. Now, they also have a Cirque du Soleil show to their music that shows in Vegas, and it's called Love. Next, the Beatles were inducted in 1988, although not all members could attend due to deaths. Fourth, their fun fact, their song Yesterday is the most covered song in the world, with more than 1,500 copies. Finally, the movie Across the Universe is completely dedicated to their music and released in 2007. But why is any of this relevant? Because the Beatles opened the door for many great British artists, musicians in America. People like the Rolling Stones, The Who, John, Eric Clapton, Pink Floyd, Duran Duran, Coldplay, Adele, Amy Winehouse, Mumford & Sons, The Wanted. So if you take anything away from this speech is that you always remember all you need is love.